She gave her daughter the house as a wedding gift. What she got in return was a rent invoice. Now, a mother who sacrificed everything will reclaim what was quietly stolen, piece by piece. Secrets written in legal clauses. Love itemized like a utility bill. This isn't just a family falling apart. It's a quiet war in the language of ownership. Welcome to the cost of love, where the eviction isn't from a house, but from a daughter's heart. The late afternoon sun cast long golden arms across the front yard, dappling through the weathered sugar maples Evelyn and her husband once planted together. The farmhouse, white-clappered, modest, beautiful in a way time had softened, sat like an old friend, a constant presence through years of shifting joys and grief. Evelyn Monroe, 62, watched from the kitchen window, her hands wrapped around a chipped porcelain mug she couldn't quite retire. Her hair, once deep auburn, was now steel gray, always pinned back neatly. Her eyes were calm, perceptive, the kind children trusted and adults sometimes feared for their truth-seeking steadiness. The in-law suite, her corner now, tucked at the back of the house, was just large enough for what remained of her world. Books lined the wall like sentinels. Her husband's favorite chair faced the garden they once planted together. Even now, years since his passing, she still spoke to him some evenings. Just small things, weather, memories, grievances too delicate for anyone else. The house had always been her tether, her legacy, lovingly restored over decades with Harold. Every molding, floorboard, and reshingled tile echoed a piece of their shared labor. So when Sienna announced her engagement last fall, gifting the house had felt right. A maternal gesture, generous and symbolic, a foundation upon which her daughter might build a life. Evelyn had insisted on keeping the in-law suite, not out of reluctance to let go, but to ease Sienna's transition and be near enough to help if needed. But Sienna didn't need help. She never had. She moved in swiftly, her presence filling the house with energy that was efficient, curated, and emotionally filtered through hashtags and color palettes. At 28, Sienna Monroe was a beacon of modern success. Marketing executive, razor-sharp, enviably composed, and Instagram luminous. She'd walked through the farmhouse like a project manager surveying a venue. The antique walnut table was replaced by something sleeker, Scandinavian, impersonal. The floral wallpaper Evelyn and Harold had chosen on a rainy anniversary weekend was stripped within the first week. Beige took its place. Even the porch, where Evelyn and a pigtailed Sienna had once shared popsicles on long summer evenings, their laughter sticky and warm, was painted over in a color called soft cement. Evelyn had repainted it 3 times in her life. The last time had been with Sienna at age 9. Sienna picked a lavender hue and smeared more paint on herself than the boards. Evelyn had taken a photo. It still sat on her nightstand, now a relic of someone else's child. Dinner was casual. Sienna made quinoa stuffed peppers and poured wine like a sommelier, recounting her latest pitch to a lifestyle brand in the city. Evelyn listened, smiling where appropriate, nodding gently. It wasn't until the plates were cleared and the kitchen lights dimmed to a showroom glow that the conversation shifted. "I've been thinking," Sienna said, sipping from her glass. "Since you're living rent-free, we should have a formal arrangement." The words landed softly, casually, the way one might suggest switching to almond milk. Evelyn blinked. "A formal arrangement?" Sienna shrugged, still scrolling absently on her phone. "Just something simple, a lease or something. It's standard, really. Helps for tax purposes. Clean lines, you know?" Evelyn didn't know. She knew how to grade essays, how to comfort crying children, how to bake without a recipe, how to weather grief. But she didn't know how to interpret this. Her fingers curled slightly around her mug. "I gave you this house," she said, her voice even. "I know, and I'm grateful." Sienna smiled, the way one does when closing a deal. "But things are different now. You live here. We should treat it like that. It's not personal." But it was. Evelyn felt it, not like a knife, but like a gentle pulling apart. Threads loosened at the seams of something once whole. She stared at the woman across from her and saw not her daughter, but a polished abstraction, so poised, so removed. Her Sienna used to cry over dead birds and scrawl poems in the margins of math homework. Evelyn remembered the night terrors, the forehead kisses, the whispered reassurances. The late-night drives home from failed sleepovers. Had she raised this? Had her quiet sacrifices, her overcompensations as a widowed mother, bred entitlement cloaked in independence? Or worse, had she created a sense of obligation so cold and transactional it had eclipsed love? She said nothing for a long while. Instead, she watched the light fixture sway slightly overhead, disturbed by a breeze that crept in through an old window Evelyn had refused to seal. Her throat tightened around unspoken things, grief, confusion, a mother's long ache for closeness. She thought about the porch again, the lavender paint, the small fingers clumsily brushing color outside the lines. "I see," she said at last. Sienna stood, gathering their plates. "It's just logistics, Mom. Nothing changes." But everything had. Evelyn returned to her in-law suite that night in silence. She lit a candle by Harold's chair and sat beside it, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the echo of footsteps upstairs that no longer needed her. Outside, the porch gleamed in its new, soulless hue, a memory erased. And in her chest, something old and familiar stirred. Not rage, not sorrow exactly, but the quiet recognition that some distances grow not from absence, but from presence redefined. She would sign the lease, she supposed, if only to see what else would quietly disappear. Most Saturdays brought the hum of strangers. Evelyn could hear them before she saw them, the pitch of laughter rising, the clink of glass against glass, the curated playlists vibrating faintly through floorboards that had once groaned only with familiar steps. From the kitchen window, she'd glimpsed string lights twinkling across the back patio and a crush of designer coats slung over her grandmother's heirloom bench. Sienna hosted effortlessly. The parties were polished, warm-toned affairs, grazing boards styled like magazine spreads, cocktails named after inside jokes Evelyn was never told. There were yoga influencer friends, colleagues in glossy monochrome outfits, neighbors she had never met despite living here longer than any of them. And Evelyn, whose name was stitched into the deed of this house not long ago, was rarely invited. Once, early on, she'd tried lingering. She emerged from her suite with a smile, holding a bowl of her butternut squash dip, still warm. She'd offered it to a cluster of guests, one of whom said, "Oh, how sweet!" That word again, sweet, before setting it aside untouched beside imported hummus and truffle crackers. Evelyn excused herself quietly after that. One night, tucked in her corner of the house, she passed by the hallway as Sienna's voice carried through the half-open French doors. "She's frugal," Sienna laughed. "Doesn't believe in spending money unless it's for repairs or fixing ancient things, like that clock, tick, tick, tick like it's judging everyone." There were chuckles. Polite, complicit. Evelyn stilled. Her hand tightened around the laundry basket she was carrying. That clock, the ornate mahogany piece with brass pendulum, had belonged to Evelyn's father. It was loud, yes, but grounding. She listened to its tick when she couldn't sleep after Harold died. It was the sound of continuity. And now, it was gone, vanished from the mantel 2 days prior without a word. She smiled when she entered the kitchen later that evening, nodding to the guests who offered hollow compliments. "You must be proud of her. The house is just stunning," as if she were not a part of it. She poured herself a glass of water, and when someone mistook her for catering staff, she said nothing. Later that night, after the last laugh faded and the music stopped, Evelyn scrubbed at a wine stain bloomed like an ink blot across the edge of the linen tablecloth she had given Sienna. A wedding gift, embroidered with Evelyn's mother's initials, MJW, for Margaret Jean Whitmore. Sienna had draped it over the outdoor bar, then forgotten it in the rain. Evelyn tried to salvage it in the quiet, the stain clinging like memory. Jonah, Sienna's fiancé, found her in the laundry room folding towels the next morning. He was barefoot, rumpled, mug in hand. "Hey," he said gently. "Sorry about the noise last night. I meant to invite you to join." Evelyn looked up, offering a soft smile. "It's fine. Looked like a lively time." Jonah rubbed the back of his neck. "Sienna just gets into hostess mode. She doesn't mean anything by it." She nodded again. He was kind, in a vague, apologetic way, like someone always trying to smooth over footprints on a dusty floor. He never challenged Sienna's tone, only softened the silence it left behind. That afternoon, Evelyn lingered in the living room, standing in the space where the clock used to sit. The mantel was empty now, save for minimalist candles and a gold-framed quote, "Curate your joy." She wasn't sure what it meant. Her joy had been uncurated, raw, imperfect, real. Hanging laundry with Harold on summer evenings, brushing paint chips from Sienna's cheeks on the porch, soaking her feet after parent-teacher conferences with a glass of boxed wine. In the stillness, she thought of her own mother, Margaret Jean, strict and silent, worn thin by responsibility. She'd baked bread, cleaned endlessly, and rarely spoke of herself. Evelyn remembered her hands, red from scrubbing, and how she used to say, "There's no room for self-pity when things need doing." Evelyn had sworn she'd be different, softer, seen, but perhaps invisibility was inherited. She found Sienna in the dining room later, scrolling on her phone while toying with a half-eaten croissant. "Sweetheart," Evelyn said gently, "about the clock. I noticed it's missing." Sienna looked up without warmth. "It didn't match the aesthetic. Jonah put it in the attic." Evelyn hesitated. "It was your grandfather's. It means a lot to me." Sienna rolled her eyes, setting the phone down. "Mom, not everything is a symbol, okay? Don't make this about you." The words struck like frost. Evelyn opened her mouth, then closed it. There were guests again, drifting in from the patio, carrying laughter like perfume. Sienna flashed a smile and turned away. Evelyn stood for a moment, watching her daughter charm the room, so composed and unreachable. She turned back to her suite, each step heavier than the last. 3 days later, it came in the mail. A formal email from a law firm. It was polite, clinical, an attached PDF titled Rental Agreement and Domestic Boundaries Addendum. The language was veiled but clear. The house, though gifted, now functioned as Sienna and Jonah's primary legal residence. The in-law suite, though acknowledged as graciously retained for Miss Monroe, required a written understanding of asset protection and shared domestic protocol. Terms included rent adjustment options, visitor clauses, and limitations on home modifications. Evelyn stared at the screen for a long time. The cursor blinked like a metronome. Not a call, not a conversation, an email. She reread the line about establishing healthy boundaries to ensure cohabitation remains harmonious and forward-focused. Forward-focused. Her chest felt tight. Not rage, no, not even sorrow. Just the slow ache of being edited out of her own story, one careful clause at a time. She closed the laptop, and for the first time since Harold's death, she cried. Not loudly, not dramatically, but with the kind of quiet grief that makes no sound and touches every corner of a once familiar room. The house no longer whispered Evelyn's name. It breathed in Sienna's rhythm now, sleek surfaces, motion sensor lights, silent hinges. The wood-paneled hallway Evelyn and Harold once painted a sunlit wheat gold was now a sterile dove gray. The hand-quilted curtains, sewn in long-ago winters while Sienna napped in a cradle by the fire, had been replaced by crisp linen panels clipped to minimalist rods. Wooden picture frames, once heavy with family moments, were gone, swapped for abstract canvases Evelyn couldn't decipher. It was as if the house had undergone a memory wipe. Even her touch left no imprint. Once, she'd recentered a vase that had been moved. The next day, it was glued to the table, permanently affixed by Sienna for balance. In the kitchen, a single refrigerator shelf was labeled with a printed tag, Mom's Items. Evelyn's mason jar pickles, her yogurt, a Tupperware of chicken soup sat like artifacts behind invisible velvet rope. She hadn't asked for it. One morning, it was just there. Then came the mail. A forwarded notice appeared in her box one Tuesday. When she asked the post office why her mail had been redirected, the clerk apologized. "Your daughter filed a change of address to a P.O. box in town, said you were consolidating." Evelyn said nothing, only nodded, stunned by the seamlessness of her own erasure. Her world was folding in on itself. Once, she had managed this household with an ease that came from decades of shared life. Now she tiptoed through it like a guest overstaying her welcome. The roses outside her window, her prized Queen Elizabeths, began to brown at the edges. She stopped tending them. What was the point? No one noticed when they bloomed. No one mourned when they withered. One afternoon, as soft rain dimpled the patio stones, Jonah knocked on the door of her suite. He stood there, hesitant, a paper cup of coffee in his hand. "Can I come in?" Evelyn nodded. He sat across from her, perched awkwardly on the edge of an old upholstered chair. I wanted to say something," he began, not meeting her eyes. About everything. She waited. "I think she's trying to push you out," he said quietly. "I didn't know she'd go this far. The lease, the mail thing. I thought it was about structure, but it's more than that." Evelyn said nothing at first. The clock ticked from the bookshelf. She had retrieved it from the attic herself, rewound it by hand. "I raised her here," she finally said, voice soft but firm. "Every board in this house has known her footsteps, and now—" Jonah looked stricken. "She's not trying to hurt you. She just thinks she's being efficient, creating boundaries." "Efficiency without tenderness is cruelty," Evelyn replied. She didn't mean it as a rebuke. It was simply true. After he left, she went to the cedar chest at the foot of her bed and retrieved the bundle of letters. Tied with a frayed blue ribbon, they smelled faintly of cedar and thyme. Harold's handwriting looped across the pages, firm, deliberate, steady. She read one aloud as if he might still answer. "You and I built something rare, Ev, not just the house, but this life. If walls could hold feelings, ours would hum with the sound of your laugh." She pressed the letter to her chest. In his words, she still existed whole. That night, she had a dream of Sienna at age 5, curled in her lap, sticky with jam and beaming from a coloring book victory. Evelyn had whispered then, 1,000 years ago it seemed, "Home is where love meets memory, not a transaction." She awoke with the weight of that echo in her chest. At the market the next morning, an old neighbor, Lena from 3 farms over, stopped her near the potatoes. "Haven't seen you at those shindigs lately," Lena said. "Sienna throws quite a spread." Evelyn smiled faintly. "I keep a quieter schedule these days." Lena leaned in, brows knitted. "Don't let her run you off, Evelyn. That house remembers you more than anyone." But houses don't speak. They surrender to the voices loudest inside them. Evelyn passed the garden on her way in. Weeds curled around the stems of her roses. A single bloom hung low, heavy with rain, too tired to lift its face. She knelt beside it. The soil was dry beneath the surface. Neglect, slow and cumulative, had done its work. She stood again, brushing dirt from her knees, and walked back inside, past the hallway with no photographs, through a kitchen she barely used, to a door that wasn't hers but no longer belonged to anyone she recognized. It was called a Rent and Relationships dinner. Sienna had designed the evening as a content feature for her growing online presence, an offbeat, intimate salon with charcuterie boards, table talk prompts, and a wine sponsor she'd secured through a friend in Napa. Evelyn hadn't been invited directly, but Jonah had mentioned it offhandedly. "You're welcome to join if you'd like. Just a casual thing." So she came. Not to intrude, but to understand. The dining room looked like a magazine spread, copper-rimmed glasses, earthy stoneware plates, and candles burning down in staggered intervals. 10 guests gathered around the reclaimed wood table Evelyn once bought at a church auction, now rebranded as rustic modern. She took her place at the far end, hands folded in her lap, half listening to discussions on financial transparency and relationships, digital intimacy, cohabitation logistics. Evelyn mostly sipped her water. The laughter swelled mid-meal, just as the wine settled into comfort. Sienna, radiant in a silk blouse Evelyn hadn't seen before, held court. "My mom's freeloading, but hey, that's what family's for, right?" she said, grinning. The guests laughed, not cruelly, just reflexively, the way people do when offered a punchline with a smile. Evelyn's heart stalled a moment, then beat on as if nothing had happened. She offered a soft smile, even chuckled politely. Then, without a word, she excused herself. No one noticed. She moved through the hallway like a passing shadow. At the corner of the dining room wall, she paused. The photo that once hung there, Sienna at 10, sticky from s'mores, curled beside Evelyn in a hammock, cheeks flushed with summer joy, was gone. In its place was an abstract painting in muted tones. Featureless, emotionless, unrooted. Back in her suite, Evelyn sat with her journal. The pages had absorbed months of quiet confusion, tender ache, and unresolved memory. She wrote slowly, deliberately. I gave her roots. She gave me conditions. She underlined it once. Then again. The house murmured around her, the distant echo of conversation, the clink of glasses being cleared. She sat in the stillness of everything she used to recognize and no longer claimed. Later that night, Jonah knocked softly, guilt pressed across his face like weather. "I didn't know she'd humiliate you like that," he said, not meeting her eyes. "I thought it was a joke." Evelyn didn't respond right away. Her voice, when it came, was composed but hollow. "It wasn't a joke to me." Jonah nodded, swallowing hard. "I'm sorry." In that moment, Evelyn crossed a quiet threshold. Humiliation no longer carried shame, it carried information. Something was irrevocably true now, no matter how long she'd tried to unsee it. She lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling fan turning slowly above. At 62, dignity looked different than it had in youth. It wasn't about defiance, it was about recognition. Knowing when love had become conditional, when presence had turned into burden. The next morning, she opened a drawer to file away some receipts. Her hands brushed a folder labeled Prenuptial, Jonah and Sienna. It wasn't hidden, just left casually on the hall desk where Evelyn still occasionally sorted the mail. She paused, then opened it. There, on the second page, under the Property and Assets section, was a single line item. Primary residence, Vermont, Sienna Monroe, sole ownership. Her name wasn't mentioned, no notation about shared history, inherited deed, lifetime investment. It was as if she'd never existed within those walls. No acknowledgement of her gift, her marriage, her decades of stewardship. Just clean, efficient erasure. Evelyn closed the folder. The roses outside remained untended. A few petals clung to their stems, stubborn and bruised. She watched them from her window. She did not cry. She had done that already. This was something else. The stillness after the storm. The clarity after the sting. And somewhere deep inside, Evelyn Monroe began to prepare for the next chapter. One written, finally, on her own terms. The first call Evelyn made was not to confront, but to prepare. She waited until the house was empty, Sienna at a brand campaign shoot, Jonah at a networking lunch, and dialed from her landline, the one tucked in the corner of her suite that no one ever thought to unplug. "Lily Henson, please," she said when the firm's receptionist answered. There was a pause. Then a familiar, confident voice lit up the line. "Ms. Monroe, it's been years. Just Evelyn now, Lily." "Never to me," Lily said, warmth cutting through professionalism. "How can I help?" Lily Henson had once been a quiet, overlooked student in Evelyn's 5th grade class. Shy, whip-smart, always 2 steps ahead of the math curriculum. Evelyn had seen her, nurtured her logic, pushed her to apply for scholarships. Now she was a lawyer with a reputation for tenacity and an almost unnerving emotional clarity. They scheduled a meeting. That afternoon, Evelyn opened the chest beneath her bed, lifting out folders that still smelled faintly of old cedar. She began organizing with a deliberate calm: the original deed, utility bills from 3 decades past, receipts from the roofing Harold replaced, invoices from contractors who had rebuilt the porch, paint swatches, blueprints, a record of renovations layered across time like geological strata. From the back of the closet, she retrieved something older, Harold's ledger. A brown, leather-bound notebook with stiff binding and careful columns drawn by hand. It had once tracked mortgage payments, grocery budgets, vacation savings. Pages turned softly beneath her fingers. His handwriting still lived here, steady, looping, etched in a way grief could not erase. Now Evelyn began to use it again. She created a new column, Emotional and Financial Contributions. She titled the first page, without irony, A Mother's Ledger. 1979, refinished hardwood floors, 3 weeks' labor, shared with Harold. 1982, inherited farmhouse, kept taxes current during economic downturn. 1997, taught Sienna budgeting with weekly grocery trips, let her hold the calculator, compare prices. 2012, remortgaged for Sienna's college tuition. 2023, gave house as wedding gift. No strings. She turned the page and wrote at the top, Cost of love, itemized. She paused then, pen in hand. The irony was complete. She had spent her life instilling in Sienna the values of care, stewardship, and accountability. She remembered grocery store math lessons. If oranges are 3 for $2, how much is 1? Little Sienna's brows furrowed with purpose, her fingers counting air. Evelyn had insisted on budgets not to constrain, but to teach value, worth, intention. And now here she was, reduced to a line item. her equity, her memory, her humanity absorbed by paperwork and prenuptial exclusions. At the law office, Lily greeted her with a tight hug and eyes that shimmered, not with pity, but fire. "I've been following your daughter's socials," she said. "You don't deserve this." Evelyn smiled faintly. "I'm not here for revenge, just restoration." Lily leaned in. "Then let's start with the facts. Paper trails are truth." They reviewed everything over chamomile tea and old anecdotes. Lily didn't flinch. She made copies, underlined clauses, highlighted tax implications and inheritance oversights. She spoke calmly, but with an edge that made Evelyn feel, finally, seen. "Don't worry about how it looks," Lily said as she scanned a decades-old contractor receipt. "Let's focus on how it lives, in law, in legacy." Back at home, Evelyn continued her tally in the ledger. Not bitterly. She refused bitterness, but with an eye sharpened by grief and growth. Generational conflict, she realized, isn't always war. Sometimes it's accounting, quiet, precise, heartbreaking arithmetic. One evening, as music pulsed faintly upstairs, Evelyn drafted a document on her old typewriter. The clack of keys filled her suite like footsteps returning. At the top, she wrote, "Invoice, cost of love." Below it, "Services rendered, emotional labor, legacy preservation, intergenerational housing security, life skills mentorship, silent forgiveness." She stopped, rubbed her temples, then added, "Total due, respect overdue, dignity non-negotiable." She folded it carefully, placed it in an envelope, wrote nothing on the outside, and for the first time in months, she slept soundly. The house was still that morning. A rare hush, broken only by the distant creak of warming wood and the whisper of wind threading through the porch screens. Evelyn had brewed a single cup of coffee, black, no sugar, and sat at the edge of the reclaimed wood dining table, the same table where her worth had once been reduced to a punchline. Sienna entered from the hallway, phone in hand, halfway through a voice memo before noticing Evelyn's posture. Still, composed, expectant. "We need to talk," Evelyn said. Sienna hesitated. "Is this about the guest list again? Because No," Evelyn said and slid the envelope across the table. "It's about the lease." Sienna lifted a brow. "What?" "You wanted a lease," Evelyn said softly. "I'm granting you one. With terms." She gestured to the envelope. "Go ahead." Sienna opened it with a smirk still ghosting her lips. Her eyes scanned the typed lines and the smirk faltered. Line by line, her face changed. "Invoice, cost of love." Itemized. Terms: 42 years of mortgage payments, emotional equity uncounted, repairs and restoration post-husband's passing, labor rendered without expectation, home equity gifted without clause or condition, years of shared labor, teaching, cooking, nurturing, never invoiced tuition coverage without lien, respect deferred, kindness unreturned, total due, dignity, balance owed, closure. "You're joking," Sienna said, but her voice trembled. Evelyn didn't move. "No, I'm finally serious." Jonah stood behind her, still and quiet. He said nothing. He had seen the document the night before. Read it in full without protest. Just a nod, a quiet acknowledgement. "This is dramatic," Sienna said, voice rising. "You can't just... What is this?" "It's a reckoning," Evelyn said. "Not legal. Emotional, symbolic, but real." Sienna scoffed. "So what? Now you want rent? Compensation? I thought you gave me this house." Evelyn's expression didn't flicker. "I gave you trust. You turned it into leverage." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was thick, layered with everything unsaid over years. Laughter that never reached both ends of the room, hugs that had grown stiff, words replaced with contracts. Jonah's gaze never left the floor. Evelyn stood slowly, her back straight, her voice a thread of velvet over steel. "Consider this both a contract and a goodbye." Sienna opened her mouth to speak, but no words came. The next morning, Evelyn packed one suitcase. Just essentials: clothes, the ledger, Harold's letters, the photograph from the old hallway, now carefully removed from its replaced frame. She left the keys on the kitchen counter beside a folded note. In the note, she wrote only one sentence: "I choose myself now." She didn't slam the door. She didn't turn back. The sun was just rising when she stepped outside. Her single suitcase rolled across the gravel path. The roses, once withered, had begun to regrow, green shoots pushing bravely toward the light. unaware of their caretaker's departure. Evelyn didn't look back, not out of defiance, but resolution. What Sienna would discover later, once the dust of pride settled, once the lawyer read the fine print and traced the paper trail back through half-forgotten filings, was this: the deed had never been fully transferred. Legally, the house still belonged to Evelyn Monroe. She had not left because she had to. She had left because she could. It began, as many betrayals now did, with a post. Sienna had always curated her public image like a brand campaign. Flawless, aspirational, gently aloof. So when word began to ripple through their social circles that Evelyn had moved out, Sienna framed it swiftly. "Some people just love drama," she wrote on Instagram, the caption under a sunlit photo of her sipping wine beside her roses, roses Evelyn had once planted. Family should be support, not sabotage, choosing peace over pettiness. The comments rolled in predictably, heart emojis, virtual hugs, affirmations of strength. Evelyn saw the post. She read the words. And she said nothing. Publicly, she remained still. But privately, she moved like quiet water finding its shape. With Lily's help, she contacted a reputable property management firm in Vermont. She had a private meeting. She signed discreet documents. She authorized listing the house, her house, for rent. The house would not sit idle, not under erasure. It would serve a new purpose now, one chosen, not assumed. Meanwhile, Jonah reached out. They met at a quiet cafe in town, the kind Evelyn used to frequent before the house swallowed her whole. He arrived early, eyes lined with fatigue. When he spoke, it was not rushed. It came slowly, each word carefully placed. "I think I'm leaving," he said. Evelyn didn't blink. "I wondered when you might." He exhaled. "I can't watch her become someone I don't recognize. I tried, but I think this house warped things." Evelyn stirred her tea. "Or maybe it just showed them clearly." He looked away. "You don't have to explain. I see it now. Too late, maybe. But I see it." She touched his hand briefly, not in comfort, but in recognition. "You're not the only one who stayed silent too long." That evening, Evelyn returned to her journal. It had grown heavier with entries these past months, pages thick with unsent letters, observations, unwept grief. She wrote, "It wasn't just her that changed. I allowed my absence to become her license. Love that never asks for return becomes currency without weight." The next day, Lily filed the paperwork, a formal notice, signed and stamped, with language precise and final. It bore Evelyn's name legally, irrefutably, and it confirmed what had long been emotionally true. Sienna no longer lived in her mother's house. When Sienna returned home from a weekend retreat, humming from the buzz of praise and curated praise, she found it taped to the front door. Official notice of eviction issued by Evelyn Monroe, owner of property, 100% deed retained. The paper fluttered gently in the breeze, and the mirror Sienna had so carefully polished began to crack. The lakeside cabin was small, barely 600 square feet, but it was hers. Evelyn signed the lease with steady hands, feeling no need to apologize for wanting less. The structure had weathered seasons with grace, pine siding softened by sun, a wraparound porch no wider than a path, and a fireplace that still coughed politely to life. She unpacked slowly. No movers, no ceremony. Just her, a kettle, the ledger, and a handful of framed photographs she had rescued before walking out. She stitched curtains from spare fabric, the same way she used to when money was tight, and Sienna needed new clothes. She baked her own bread again, not for guests or holiday spreads, but because she missed the scent. It filled the space with something fuller than memory, something alive. Each morning she brewed coffee beside the lake. Each evening she lit a single candle on the windowsill, a quiet act of claiming. Letters began arriving, postcards from former students, small square notes in looping handwriting. "You made me believe I wasn't stupid. Your class was the only place I felt safe. I still remember how you taught us to draw with words." She pinned them to a corkboard above her tiny writing desk. There, Evelyn rebuilt herself, not as someone's mother, someone's wife, someone's burden, but as someone. She joined a book club that met every other Tuesday in a neighbor's den. She offered to teach art once a week to single mothers at the community center. They painted in layers: grief, hope, laughter, fatigue. And when they left their brushes, they left a little lighter. It was there she met Camilla, 17, sharp, barely keeping her head above home. They sat together after class one afternoon, Camilla tracing the rim of her paint cup, hesitant. "How do you know when to walk away?" the girl asked softly. Evelyn folded her hands. "When staying starts to sound like begging," she answered. Camilla nodded, the words nestling into her silence. Weeks passed. The world turned gently. Evelyn felt her body slow into peace. Then came the text, from Sienna. Short, unpunctuated. "Can I visit sometime?" Evelyn read it. Once, then again. Her thumb hovered over a response. She turned off the phone. The silence she chose now was not weaponized. It was earned. 3 days later, someone knocked. It was Jonah. He stood on the porch, his coat damp with lake mist, holding a folder. "I'm filing for separation," he said. "I stayed longer than I should have." Evelyn let him in, set the kettle to boil. He handed her the folder. "I need a character witness, someone who saw who she became and who she undid." Evelyn didn't answer right away. Instead, she poured him tea, placed a blanket over the back of his chair, and sat across from him. Quietly, calmly, like someone who no longer begged to be seen. Later, after he left, she returned to her writing desk. She flipped to a fresh page in the ledger and wrote in ink, "Belonging isn't inherited. It's chosen, built, earned. This time, I belong to myself." Whispers moved faster than curated images. Sienna's social circle, once glittering with brand reps and weekend collaborators, began to contract. Stories drifted between hands holding wine glasses and DMs laced with questions no one asked her directly. "Did you hear about the eviction? She kicked her mom out of her own house. I thought she inherited it, no?" At first, Sienna deflected, publicly cool, privately unraveling. Her posts became erratic, captions tinged with edge. She missed work meetings, forgot deadlines. Her curated world began to peel at the corners. Then came the voicemails. Angry, fragmented, voice catching somewhere between accusation and desperation. "You're punishing me. You don't even know what it's like to be left. You were supposed to teach me. What did you teach me, really?" Evelyn listened to none of them. She saw the notifications stack. Then she deleted them. All. Not in cruelty, in clarity. She no longer owed herself in pieces. One afternoon, Lily stopped by the cabin. She brought scones from a bakery 2 towns over and a folder of finalized documents. Over tea, Lily said, "Sometimes the best justice is letting them feel the echo of your absence." Evelyn nodded. "Silence used to feel like punishment. Now it feels like peace." The final document was thick, precise, permanent deed reassignment. No dispute left unaddressed. No line item left unspoken. Lily slid it toward her. Evelyn signed. Across town, Sienna received the packet, this time from the court, a certified envelope stamped with finality. Inside, the formal invoice Evelyn had once typed on her old machine, now affixed with court recognition and clarity. Invoice, cost of love acknowledged, filed, enforced. Sienna dropped it, reportedly. Jonah later relayed the moment, her fingers shaking, eyes unable to hold the weight of words once laughed away. But Evelyn didn't ask for updates. She no longer waited at the edges of someone else's remorse. That evening, she stepped outside with her watering can. Her new rosebush, gifted by Camilla's mother after their last painting session, was in bloom. A single pink blossom had opened. She bent close, touched the petal gently. Then she watered it, patient and present. No fanfare, just the quiet cost of love, tended in full. Evelyn dreamed of her mother that night. Margaret Jean Whitmore, rigid spine, hands always moving, affection rationed like wartime sugar. She'd once told Evelyn, without cruelty but without softness, "A mother's job is to keep things running, not to be liked." Evelyn had internalized that as a child, then spent a lifetime trying to rewrite it as a mother. She hadn't always known how, but she had tried. Long nights of gentle correction, morning routines laced with praise, birthday cakes baked from scratch even when money was thin. Sitting by her small cabin window, journal in hand, Evelyn wrote, "I broke my back trying to give Sienna what I never had. I forgot to teach her gratitude. Maybe I mistook love for protection, and protection for silence." Later, she took down the old family portrait she'd brought with her. A stiff black and white of her parents. Her younger self, stiff in her Sunday dress, smiling because she was told to. She wrapped it in linen, placed it in a drawer. On the wall, she hung a painting she had finished that week. Waves, endless and blue, pulling forward and back. Let the past ebb, she thought. Let it carry away what no longer belongs. That afternoon, Reese stopped by, Camilla's mother, her shoulders lighter now than when they first met. She held an envelope in her hand. Camilla got in, she said, her first choice, with a full scholarship. Evelyn smiled, eyes misting. She earned every inch of it. Reese hugged her, fierce and fast. You showed her she was more than her past. Evelyn held the words in her chest like a warmth she didn't realize she'd missed. That evening, she opened her laptop and began the first chapter of a memoir. The Price of Being Home. She didn't aim for anger. She aimed for clarity. She wrote about the porch with lavender paint, the silence between mothers and daughters, the ledger she had inherited without asking, and the cost of rewriting it. She wrote in long stretches, pausing only for tea or sleep or to refill the bird feeder outside. She didn't expect anything to come of it. But she published a piece from the memoir on her blog, just a sample, a post titled What We Owe Our Mothers and What They Don't Owe Us Back. It traveled, first through shares, then comments, then an email, subject line, feature request, Women's Archive Weekly. The article was picked up by a major women's rights publication. Within days, her inbox filled. Messages from strangers, daughters, mothers, sons, pouring in with stories, with thanks, with their own ledgers scribbled in margins. And then came Jonah's letter, handwritten, folded in 3 parts. Evelyn, you gave me a blueprint for leaving broken things. I thought endurance was loyalty. But you showed me that dignity is a kind of departure. I'm learning to live by it now. With gratitude, Jonah. She closed the letter and let it sit on her desk. The waves on the wall swelled slightly in her peripheral vision, caught in late sunlight. Inheritance, she had finally learned, wasn't just about what we leave behind. It's also about what we stop carrying forward. It was a late afternoon, the lake dressed in a muted silver, when Evelyn heard the knock. Not the polite kind, not the knock of a neighbor or the mail carrier. It was tentative, hesitant, almost unsure it deserved to be answered. She opened the door to find Sienna standing there, alone, wind-chapped, eyes ringed with sleeplessness and smudged mascara, her once impeccable appearance unraveled at the edges. No camera in sight, no performance. I was nearby, she said, voice hoarse. Evelyn didn't move. She noted the suitcase by Sienna's ankle, the way her hand trembled slightly as she tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. I thought, Sienna started, then faltered. Tears welled. Her chest rose sharply once, twice. Then the dam broke. I thought you were supposed to stay, she said, voice cracking. No matter what, that's what mothers do. The words hit softly, but not without weight. Evelyn didn't flinch. She let the silence breathe, then answered evenly, gently. I did. She stepped out onto the porch, folding her arms against the chill. Until it cost me myself. Sienna wiped her face roughly with the back of her sleeve, mascara streaking across her cheek like pen on parchment. I didn't know what I was doing, she whispered. I was just trying to build something. At the expense of what was already built, Evelyn said, not accusing, just stating. There was a long pause. No seagulls, no passing cars, only the sound of the lake sighing against the shore. Sienna looked down, then up again. Can I come in? Evelyn turned slightly, then motioned to the old bench beside the door, weathered pine with a hand-sewn cushion. We can start here. Sienna blinked, confused, then slowly nodded. She walked over and sat, clutching her coat around her. Evelyn remained standing for a moment, then joined her. Not close, not far. The sun dropped lower behind them, gold dipping into gray. They didn't speak for several minutes, not because there was nothing to say, but because they finally understood that not all truths rush to be spoken. Some sit quietly first, just needing space to be heard. No apology, no forgiveness, just acknowledgement. And for now, that was enough. The box arrived on a Thursday morning, unmarked, ordinary, but inside were copies of the memoir Evelyn never thought she'd finish. She opened the first one slowly, fingers tracing the title embossed in matte ink. Unclaimed, a mother's quiet exit. She ran her hand across the cover. The waves she had painted for the jacket art curled along the edge like a signature, gentle but unwavering. The spine creaked slightly as she opened it. Inside, the dedication. For the women who left quietly. You are heard now. The launch was small by publishing standards, but it filled the room. They gathered in the community center where she had taught art. Reese brought Camilla, who clutched the first signed copy like a talisman. Lily came too, holding Evelyn's hand for a long moment before stepping aside to give her the spotlight. Former students, now in their 30s and 40s, came with flowers, with stories, with tears. One woman whispered, "You taught me that my voice wasn't too much." Another said, "This book is the mother I needed." Evelyn thanked them, one by one. She read aloud a single passage from the chapter titled, "The Cost of Silence," then closed the book gently. Across the room, someone delivered a bouquet, wild peonies, blue thistle, and white roses. There was no card. Evelyn didn't need one. Back at the cabin, she sat on the porch as dusk cooled the lake's edge. The new rosebush beside her had grown taller. Another bud opened, soft and slow. In the journal she still kept, she wrote, "Home isn't where they put your name on the mailbox. It's where no one makes you apologize for existing." Then she rose, walked to her little workshop, and came back with a paintbrush and scrap wood. She painted a sign by hand. No flourish, just truth. Black letters on a pale blue plank. Still here. Still mine. She hammered it into place on the porch post and stepped back, brushing dust from her palms. The air was still, expectant, not empty, just open. She sat again, pulled a blanket over her lap, and let the quiet hold her. Somewhere down the line, Sienna might try again. But Evelyn had learned the difference between reopening a wound and building a boundary. She didn't need the house back. She had given herself a new one. And as night folded around her, she smiled. "She called me cheap," she said aloud, to no one in particular, "but I was always priceless." Call to action. Ever questioned what love costs when it's no longer unconditional? If this story echoed something unspoken in your own walls, don't silence it. Share it. Start the conversation. This isn't just Evelyn's story. It's every unthanked mother, every rewritten will, every quiet goodbye. And maybe it's yours too.